Did you know that more millionaires were made through investing than any other means in the United States? When it comes to investing, where do you start? What is the basics? It can be very intimidating when you don't know the ins and outs. And of course, knowing exactly what the long term effect is going to be on your finances. Regardless of that, it is time to start investing. In today's video, we're going to be looking at how to start investing. Now, this is actually from a conversation that I had earlier today with an individual that they want to invest. They're not exactly sure how, and they're not exactly sure where. So we're going to be going over all of that in today's video. Starting with the first one, setting your investing goal. Now, this, of course, is the key when it comes to investing, is knowing the why and the logic behind why you want to invest. If it is really to start investing to build a retirement fund, is it paying for your kids' graduation? Is it a down payment for a house? Are you looking to travel the world when you retire? Regardless of what it is, you need to set an investing goal because that is going to be one of the biggest things that is going to essentially be the driving factor to helping you invest, and also remembering those goals and why you set those specific goals when it comes to investing. Number two, figuring out how much you're going to invest. This, of course, is going to be very personalized to you. When it comes to investing, I really believe in the philosophy of paying yourself first. I know paying off debt is a huge factor, giving you the ability and more money to invest. But when it comes to investing, for a lot of people, if you don't invest up front, if you're not putting money into that 401k, chances are you're never going to start investing because you're always going to have debt, whether it is credit card debt, unsecured debt, whether it's car loan debt, student loan debt, whatever it is, there's also going to be and always going to be debt for a majority of Americans, which is the reason why starting to invest early is going to make a big difference. Now, of course, ultimately, we want to get you to a 15%. So why the 15%? It's not a magical number that is really going to set you up with everything. When you think of 15% of your salary, so if you have your 100%, you're putting away 15%. That means that you're living on 85% of that remaining income that you have. And of course, when you start looking at 15%, for some people, it might seem like a small fraction of a bucket, especially when you're not making much money. Let's say you're starting out in a job, you're making, $15,000, $20,000 a year. 15% isn't going to have an impact. But then you start going to school, you finish school, you get in your career. Now you're making, 30, 40, 50,000 a year. 15% is going to make a much bigger impact when it comes to retirement. Then, of course, as you get later in your career, you get more experience, more promotions, more raises, things of that nature. Now you're making $100,000 to $150,000 a year. 15% is an absolute game changer. Where if you're putting, $10,000, $15,000 away into an investment account, and then you combine that, or it is in conjunction with some of the employer matches that we see out there, 15% is your contribution. That is where you want to get. Even if systematically you do this over a number of years, for instance, let's say your first raise, you get a 3% raise, bump it up by 1%, bump it up by 2%. That way you're net positive and still getting a little bit of a raise in your paycheck, yet you're still putting more money away for that goal. It's going to make a big difference. Now, of course, when we start investing, in my thought, in my honest opinion here, is when you start investing, you want to get the employer match. This is going to be your number one priority, getting the employer match. It is going to be the first step that you want to get. Once you get to that employer match, then it goes into the debt repayment phase. The reason being, when you start looking at high interest debt, when you start looking at bad debt, chances are you're running about 20, 25, possibly even 30%. And of course, when you look at contributions, there's no place that I am aware of, and if you know, let me know in the comments, that you're guaranteed to get a 25 to 30% on your investment every single year, because most of the stock market runs about 10%. Which again, if you're putting in 15%, stock market is making roughly on average about 10% a year. That is a pretty good growth factor in there when you start looking at the compounding factor and the compounding effect over a number of years, the 10, 20, 30, 40 years before retirement. And of course, depending on what exactly you're saving for, it could be the 5 years for a new house. It could be 18 years before your kids are going to college, which of course is the reason why we do have that investment plan. Now, looking at number three, choose your investment account. This, of course, is going to be very dependent on you. So we're going to run through a couple different things to really talk about what investment vehicle is best for you. When it comes to retirement accounts, it is a Roth. I can say this without a doubt. I have seen so many people that have traditional 401ks, have traditional IRAs that always wish they've had a Roth and always wish they had a Roth. Roth will beat traditional out for the long term because of the taxes. Now, of course, with the traditional, you get an upfront tax benefit. With the Roth, you get the long-term compounding interest. And of course, with the Roth, the big thing is you don't have to take out the money through required minimum distributions once you get a little bit further down the road. Now, when it comes to these retirement accounts, if your employer does not offer a 401k plan, a 403b, whatever it may be, always, and I have a link down below for M1 Finance, we have Robinhood, we have a couple down there that if you do want to open these retirement accounts, like a Roth IRA, definitely go down and open them. The sooner you open them, the sooner you start making contributions, the sooner you're going to start seeing that growth factor. Now, of course, at this point, if you still haven't hit that 15%, you're going to be doubling back. So starting with the 401k match, and again, let's say they're offering you 4%, you're going to put in 4%. Then, of course, your employer is going to match 4%. Now, the reason and the logic behind this is a majority of 401k plans don't have the best selection or the best option when it comes to retirement planning, which means you could be putting your money into something that is not going to grow as much as we see with like an S&P 500, like an index fund. We've seen a real big mix when it comes to 401k plans, and a lot of people put money into target date funds. You personally, regardless of what you do, you have to take time. You have to understand your 401k plan. You have to understand where your money is going into and what you're investing in and what is going to be the big benefit. Now, once you hit that employer match, then you're going to open that Roth IRA. You're going to max the Roth IRA contributions. Now, of course, looking at the Roth IRA contributions, the contributions are way lower than what we see with the 401k plans, which means once you do max out, and if you max out that Roth, then we're going to add those extra percentage back into that 401k, bringing you to the 15%. Now, of course, a lot of people have also asked, can I go over the 15%? Can I put more money in my 401k? Absolutely, but you have to keep and really take respect to, there might be things outside of these investment vehicles, outside of these retirement accounts, because when it comes to 401ks, when it comes to IRAs, they are specifically only for retirement and only for retirement itself. If you're taking money out of these, chances are you're going to be penalized. There are special circumstances that you can get around, but the chances are that you are going to get penalized if you're taking money out and taking your contributions out earlier than you're actually allowed to. And again, there's age limitations and things like that that you can take money out without penalties. There's a lot of in and outs. Now, of course, if you're self-employed, you can look at simple IRAs, you can look at SEP IRAs. There's a couple different ways if you are self-employed, so you can continue to make those contributions into those IRA plans at a much bigger and a much higher contribution limit, which does make a big difference. Now, of course, once you're putting that 15% into retirement, this is the reason why I say and why we have always said 15% is what you want to put into retirement. That is it. You don't want 16, you don't want 18, you don't want 20. The reason being, if you're investing and if you're putting money for other things, this could also be short-term investing, let's say the next 3 to 5 years. This could be the MESP programs or the education savings accounts if you do have kids. This could be money that you're putting into money market accounts, that you're putting into high yield savings accounts. This could be investments that you're using for a ton of different things that are earmarked for other things outside of retirement. Now, of course, this is where traditional brokerage accounts like the ones we have down below from M1 and Robinhood are going to come into play, because these are going to be taxable brokerage accounts where you can park money. Now, again, thinking of those high yield savings accounts, they are offering 5%, but even looking at some of the shorter term investing, the 3 to 5 years, you could look at some of those index funds to park your money there. That would make a big difference. And of course, guys, if you're loving the channel and the content that I'm putting out, please subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments what you guys think as we get into number 4. It is choosing your investment. Now, this, of course, can be very diverse. A lot of people say mutual funds. Me personally, I do index funds and I do ETFs only, which means if you've checked out some of my 3 ETF portfolios, when we start looking at a growth ETF, then we look at kind of a core ETF and then a dividend ETF. Those are the 3. And also, depending on your age, is going to make a big difference on how that is broken up within the 3 ETFs. Now, of course, let's say you're in your 20s and you're looking to put money, a majority of it is going to go into those growth ETFs, which of course are very heavy in technology, because of course technology has been a massive growing factor When you look at the NASDAQ, when you look at the S&P, it has been one of the absolute pushing levers that we have seen all-time highs over the entirement of this entire year. And even looking at today with what the Federal Reserve has said, it is again another all-time high. Now, of course, you could put money into mutual funds. My personal preference, I do not put money in mutual funds. Now, mutual funds are actually pooling money together and they are managed. Now, mutual funds do come with a significant fee, usually about 1%, 1.5% for a mutual fund, which means they are going to be far more expensive than what we see with ETFs, than what we see with index funds. And of course, before you're investing and choosing your investment, do your research. I cannot stress it enough. When you do your research, you have to make sure that you know exactly what you're investing in. And of course, number 5, picking an investment strategy. This is going to be where the 3-fund ETF portfolio comes in. It does make it super easy because when you start looking into, let's say, the S&P 500 or the VOO, you are investing in the 500 largest companies in the S&P 500 and within the United States. And that also does count for about 80%. Now, of course, if you wanted a little bit more diversification, you could go for the Vanguard Total Index or the VTI. That is going to not only go into that S&P 500, but you're also going to have the other, I think around 3,200 stocks that encompass the entire United States stock market. So you can invest in everything. Now, again, when you think of the growth factor, when you think of that growth ETF, this could be something like the VUG, which of course is the Vanguard Growth Fund. You could also be looking at like the QQQM, which of course is the Invesco Growth Fund. And then of course, when it comes to international, question I get a lot of times is why do I not invest into international ETFs, international mutual funds, international stocks at all? Number one, I don't know the companies like I know US-based companies. When you look at your Apple, your Google, Nvidia, I see a lot of investment strategies. I see a lot of research and everything on them. When we're looking at companies outside of the United States, I do not do as much research. So again, don't invest in anything you don't know. And when it does come to international, international used to be very, very big many years ago. And the big thing is when you start looking at these bigger companies, almost all of the very large companies are global companies. Even when you think, again, of Apple, looking at Nvidia, looking at Coca-Cola, looking at McDonald's, looking at all of these large mega cap S&P 500 companies, they are global companies, which means the international markets over the last 30 years have only beat the US markets 3 years out of 30. That means if you would invested in international, the US market, even though if there's growth in both sides, but the US market would have beat it 27 out of the 30 years if you were invested in there. That is the reason why, again, I don't go in for the international. And even in the years where the international did beat out the US market, they still had a positive growth year for the US market. It wasn't, total devastation within the US. And then, of course, the international crushed it. It was kind of different. Now, number 6, we get into opening the investment account. Now, of course, starting with the workplace, looking at the 401ks, looking at the 403bs, this is going to be the first place. And number 1, you want to know what is the investment match. This is going to be a big difference. And also you want to know, do they have a Roth option? Now, for me personally, my 401k at work does have a Roth option, which is I put everything in a Roth. Like I said, mathematically, when you start getting many years down the road, there's nothing that beats that Roth. And if you can, if they have a good selection of growth ETFs, if you can invest how you need to within your 401k, the 15% might just go in there. If you can't, and if they don't have the Roth option, you again want to at least meet the employer contribution, getting that employer match. The rest of it is going to go into the Roth IRA, which again, if you open it at M1 Finance down below, you can go ahead and invest it. That is the big difference when it comes to financial institutions. So when you think of your banks and your credit unions, having the ability to open up an IRA at that level, you're only going to be able to get products and services that they offer. Majority of them, you cannot invest in the market, which again, your money for the longevity has to be invested in the market. If you're putting money into retirement accounts have to be invested in the market, period. Once you figure out the workplace plan, You get the Roth IRA all covered. Then you go back to putting more money and bumping it up to that 15% contribution. And of course, the final one, before you start investing, make sure you're learning. That is it, guys. You have to make sure that you're learning. It is nonstop. And again, a lot of individuals that I talk to have no education, no formal education when it comes to high school or college, when it comes to investing, when it comes to 401k, really when it comes to anything. And of course, before you really start into this investment vehicle, putting that 15% away does make a big difference, but you want to make sure that you're paying off and you're eliminating that debt, because that is going to be the most detrimental thing for not only you as it is right now, being able to keep your paycheck, but it is going to give you the power to invest when that debt is gone. All right, guys, so that is going to do it for today's video. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. And as always, thank you guys for watching.